we know education has positive ripple effect across all social sectors. Despite this, global education continues to be the orphan of the aid sector. How can we ensure that G7 leaders will drive a tangible step change and translate political will into financial commitments, especially at the Global Education Summit?
That's a very good question, an important question. It's true that the pandemic has wiped out much of the progress achieved over the past decade. But the learning crisis, which, like Jayathma very well described it, it has existed already before COVID. So it's not nothing new. It has been existing for a longer time. But it's now deepened by inequalities, digital divide, by psychological and mental issues. So of course there are new challenges, and the situation is much worse than it was before the COVID-19 hit. I fully agree that there cannot be another lost generation. And that's why we need to recommit to the SDGs and make education a global political priority. And I can tell you, my friends, that the EU is taking a leadership on this. I have decided to increase funding to education in our external budget, so that in the next 7 years, the European Union, under my responsibility countries, is using at least 10% of our external funding to education. And I really, of course, call on governments to keep education funding high on the agenda, and also the mainstream educational priorities throughout the recovery initiatives, because we know that many countries, not only in Europe but worldwide, are now preparing their recovery plans. So I think education needs to be at the heart of that recovery plan and agenda. So of course we need to invest more, but we also need to invest better. So we have to work hand in hand through coordinated action, and this is important. So I really think that especially at the country level, GPE, European Union, World Bank, other international institutions, UN family and so forth, we need to work as a coordinated manner. So I think that's the only way to really support the partner countries, especially the least developed countries, and also achieve results. But the European Union is showing a leadership, and I'm very committed to this approach.
Thank you, Jutta. I think you're right. Like, we do need to invest more and invest better and work together, because this is not going to be the only global crisis we're going to experience as a civilization, as a country. And I, as a young person, I'm scared that with every new global pandemic or every new global issue, we are worrying that we're going to lose the gains that we've made in the past. And if that continues to be something that we're worried about, it means we really need to change our approach to make sure, like, regardless of what crisis we're facing, we'll never have to worry that we're going to lose past gains. Like, past gains becomes, this is what they are. And like with new crisis, we just try to make sure we continue to accelerate forward, and not so much of spending so much time worrying that we're going to lose all the gains that we've made in the past decades, because that really shows that there is a fundamental problem with the current approach that we have. As you know, GP is asking world leaders and supporters to raise their hands to fund education through GPE, because every change starts with a powerful act, which can be as simple as raising your hand in a classroom. Now, I'm going to start with you, Jayathma. Would you tell us why you raise your hand for GPE, please?
to add to what
Yes.
Jutta just mentioned, and I'm
Of
really
course.
excited to hear that the European Union under her leadership is in fact increasing their contributions to education. And you and I, we live in this anxiety that every time there is a disaster, that funding for youth or funding for education or funding for youth friendly services gets cut, because that has been our lived reality as young people, what we have seen and experienced. And for me, what the European Union is trying to do is what is logical right now. If you actually go in the cycle of saying, okay, because there is a crisis, we are going to cut down education funding. So when there is a next crisis, we are actually having a generation of young people who are not equipped with the knowledge, skills, or the expertise that they need to be resilient and resourceful in the face of that crisis. So if we are serious about preventing or managing future crises, what we need to do is to invest in education so that we empower a generation of young people who are able to take care of themselves and their communities in the face of a future crisis. So for me, what's logical is not cutting funding for education when there is a crisis, but rather looking at ways of improving funding that goes into education so that we build that generation for them to be able to face the challenges of the future on their own. So I'm raising my hand for education because I want world leaders to know, if they decide not to allocate funding for education, or if they decide to cut funding for education, we as young people see that as those leaders actively trying to jeopardize our future. So please invest in education. We are raising our hands. Thousands of young people are raising their hands. So many leaders are stepping up. So I am calling on everyone watching us today to join this cause, and all world leaders to take this responsibility seriously and help GPE raise the $5 billion that they need to embark on this strategic action to really empower a generation of young people who are able to realize their fullest potential.
Thank you very much, Jayathma. Now, Jutta, would you tell us why you raised your hand for GPE?
I'm definitely raising my hand for the education today. Also, I want to raise my hand for all the children to have the opportunity to build a better future filled with their dreams and ambitions. And I think, through the education, access to quality education, we are providing opportunities to young children, young people and children to really make their dreams come true. That's the purpose of life.
You've heard it from Commissioner Jutta. You've heard it from UN Youth Envoy Jayathma for why they're raising their hand for education. And just to reiterate what my dear friend Jayathma just said, we should never think about cutting funding for education under no circumstances, because education is the bedrock of progress of our civilization. And so I would like to thank you both for joining me today for this month's episode of Raise Your Hand Live. I would also like to thank everyone for tuning in. Remember, every change starts with a powerful act. You can join us and raise your hand to call on world leaders to fund education by visiting www.raiseyourhand.net. Now, back over to you, Commissioner, for a special announcement.
Dear friends, I have some great news to share with you. In our discussion earlier, I raised my hand for education today for all children. I told you that I am committed to investing more in education. The European Commission walks the talk. We continue to support the Global Partnership for Education. As announced by President von der Leyen, we will increase our contribution to 100 million euros per year for a total of 700 million euros until 2027. Team Europe stands ready to lead global efforts to bring children back to school and learning. We welcome everyone to join us in these efforts.